Hi students, in this video I'm going to give you an overview of the Enlightenment. Where does this intellectual phenomenon come from that's going to exercise such a huge influence over the history of the 18th, 19th and 20th centuries, and even still exercise an influence today? One important contextual event that in a less condensed course we would go into in more detail is the scientific revolution. The scientific revolution is an important context to understanding the Enlightenment. And the scientific revolution is a period of great scientific achievement that takes place in Europe between over much of the second half of the 16th century and into the 17th century. And we see great achievements in astronomy, the development of a workable heliocentric model, of medicine, of mathematics, and of electricity. And these scientific achievements are very exciting for people in Western civilization at the time. And in some ways, they framed the Enlightenment, because a lot of social scientists, although they wouldn't have called themselves that in the 17th century, look at these developments and think, isn't it possible that we can apply a scientific format to human society? That just in the same way that we have these new scientific methods that we're applying to mathematics and science, couldn't we apply something like that to society as well? And so this is a part of the Enlightenment, a sort of mechanization of human society and how human society works. The other way in which the scientific revolution provides important context for the Enlightenment is the optimism that it provides, the confidence in human beings that it provides. So on the one hand, you have a desire to kind of find a scientific approach to society. On the other hand, you have all this optimism. Look at how amazing the human mind is. Look how amazing the human being is, that they can reach such achievements. And so this leads to a much more optimistic view about human beings than in some ways we've been seeing in past weeks. Think about the Reformation, think about Luther and Calvin. There's this emphasis on human beings as evil, or their human nature as being depraved. But with Enlightenment thinkers, we see a much more positive approach to human beings and human nature. And we see this, first of all, in the philosopher, the English political philosopher who's seen as the father of the Enlightenment, John Locke. And Locke separates himself immediately from Thomas Hobbes. Remember, Thomas Hobbes said that human beings are naturally kind of nasty and competitive in a state of war with one another. And Locke says, no, human beings are naturally rational and good. And therefore, when they enter into a society, there must be advantages to entering into this society. So both of them agree that human society is artificial. But for Locke, human beings are naturally rational and good. Because they're naturally rational and good, they have certain fundamental rights. And therefore, when they enter into a society, these fundamental rights must be protected. If the rights aren't being protected, then the society needs to be changed. And these fundamental rights, these most fundamental rights for Locke, are life, liberty, and property. He says that the way relationship between the government and the subjects, the citizens, should work is that there should be some kind of social contract. Citizens will obey the government will protect their social rights. The government fails to do that, it legitimates its citizens rising up against it because they would be better off outside of society. And we see other Enlightenment thinkers pursuing the same type of thought based on the assumption that men are naturally rational and good. And we see this with Voltaire. With Voltaire, we have an emphasis on the rational. And for Voltaire, anything that's irrational needs to be marginalized in society. And for Voltaire, that especially includes religion. Religion for Voltaire is irrational. The morals, the good part of religion, we should be able to work out through reason. The irrational part, this belief in God and that God wants us to follow these rituals, that's something that he wants to relegate to private life. If you want to do that privately, that's okay, but don't make it a part of everyone's life, everyone else's life and society. Very radical at the time. And the last Enlightenment thinker that I focused on is Rousseau. With Rousseau, it's an emphasis on man as good, or human beings as good. For Rousseau, human beings are most free when they exist outside of society. For Rousseau, society is oppressive. So we have human beings who are totally free outside of society, and then they enter into a society and they're forced to follow all these oppressive conventions and laws. And so Rousseau doesn't like society, but he thinks we're stuck with society. And so the way we can make society as good as it's probably going to get is by, the language he uses is forcing human beings to be free by following the general will. How do we know the general will? It's expressed through a democratic vote. So get everyone together, vote on something, you get people to the point where they're as free and unaffected by the oppressive nature of society as possible, and then we have an idea of what free human beings would want, and our society can follow that as best as it possibly can. But it will always be somewhat oppressive. And so these are the major currents of thought in the Enlightenment. Locke and Voltaire, and then Rousseau is a little more extreme, and even some of the Enlightenment thinkers find him too extreme. And so we have these principles of the Enlightenment forming. Emphasis on human beings as equal, an emphasis on making morality something that's private for individuals, an emphasis on government being determined by social contract, and an emphasis on optimism. Optimism that through reason, human beings can naturally, or in a society, make their situation better and better. And over the course of the 17th century and the 18th century, we're going to see these ideas spread. They're spread in a number of different ways. Firstly, through places where people gather to talk. So I've highlighted the Salon Coffeehouse. These were new places where in the 17th century that was seen as a testament to the success of human beings. Coffee, it's a product that's brought from the New World. It's supposed to make you think more clearly. It's supposed to, I've got to be careful what I say here. It makes you more mentally agile. And so it's a testimony to human ingenuity. And so coffee houses, places that are producing coffee, somewhere where you go where you can consider yourself one of the intellectual elite and study these ideas and talk about these ideas. And also changes in reading. Now, with the printing press, there's a focus less on reading a few good books intensively, and instead a focus on reading as many books on as many different subjects as you can. And so you have the creation of texts like Diderot's Enlightenment Encyclopedia, which offers an Enlightenment view on all thought. Or that's a bad way to put it. It offers an Enlightenment perspective on all different matters, or at least it claims to provide that. And so that is a way in which people are trying to read about everything. And so with the encyclopedia, they can know what the Enlightenment view is, or what Diderot says in the Enlightenment view on everything. And so this is the way in which Enlightenment ideas are spread. The last aspect of 18th century society that I want to touch on in this video is Enlightened Despots. Who were they? Well, a despot is an authoritarian ruler, but these despots are enlightened. So it's basically the idea that we're going to promote Enlightenment ideas, but we're still going to be monarchs, and we're still going to rule our kingdom as monarchs. There's no sense of a social contract or a general will or a democratic vote, but we're going to promote a lot of these ideas within our kingdoms. We've already kind of seen some of this in England already with William and Mary. France is still an absolutist kingdom, but we see this in Northern and Eastern European countries, especially Prussia, this emerging Protestant Germanic country in Northern Europe, which adopts an enlightened despotic monarchy, and also Russia. Russia, which is coming out of centuries of being ruled by the Mongols and is becoming more and more European and is adopting European ideas. But they're kind of entering into a vacuum. They're kind of adopting European ideas as they find them in the 18th century. And so they adopt the Enlightenment, but they also adopt absolutism. And so Russia is becoming more and more influential in Europe at this time, especially in Eastern Europe, and is adopting some of these European ideas. Well, Austria, the Holy Roman Empire, is going to adopt a few Enlightenment ideas, but in the main is going to remain a more traditional monarchy. Not necessarily an absolutist monarchy, but a more traditional approach to society. Hope that's helpful. Hope you enjoy learning more about the Enlightenment.